This time, Necromancy in Naat, one of the 16 Zothique stories by Clark Ashton Smith, is up for discussion by myself, Robert Gibson alias Zendexor, and my teammates Anthony Simeone and XJ. Zothique, as every educated person should know, is the lone continent in a somewhat desiccated far future Earth, where the mood is generally one of sombre and tragic magnificence, replete with evil magicians, despots, and slavers who busy themselves making life even more difficult than it would otherwise be on our aged planet. And to the west of Zothique lies the island of Naat, on which the socio political situation is to a more than average extent disadvantageous, the place being infested with cannibals and ruled by necromancers, and consequently shunned by all the other peoples of Zothique. One of Clark Ashton Smith's most likeable protagonists, the simple nomad Prince Yadar from the land of Zyra, is searching for his kidnapped betrothed Dalili, who has been seized by slavers. His ship is blown off course towards Nut, which is lucky in one sense, in that he finds Dalili there, but the reunion leaves something to be desired. The tale is so gloomy that I ask myself why I have been able to endure so many readings of it. To answer this question, I need to make use of an oxymoron, a phrase embodying an apparent contradiction like Milton's darkness visible. The oxymoron I shall coin for the Zothique tales, and this one in particular, is colourful gloom. The colour comes from Smith's gorgeous mastery of language, which makes the entire story into a kind of symphony of prose. Even the fact that the characters declaim rather than speak their words normally is an entirely fitting, excuse me, an entirely fitting component of the operatic atmosphere. And to complete the tale's dramatic structure, you get the extremely macabre climax, in which the two lovers are together at last after the boss necromancer Vachan meets his end. Now, I'm glad to see that my teammates are still fully alive after having read it, so I shall hand over to them.
Actually, you want to go first, or
Sure. Hmm. I'm actually after reading the story, I'm actually at quite a loss as to whether I should characterize this as like a happy story or a gloomy story. It's very I'm like super conflicted because it is it is a happily ever after kind of story, huge stress on ever after, but it's not your usual happily ever after story either. um Spoiler alert for anyone that kind of want to check out the story yourself. I highly recommend you do. You can just stop the podcast right at this moment and then come back and revisit anytime. But yes, it's not every day that you have a story where the two protagonists, I mean the two lovebirds, get together after they're dead as zombies. That's definitely atypical, I would say. I'm not sure. It sounds like the kind of it sounds like the kind of if you ask a guy who's perpetually gloomy and pessimistic to, hey, can't you just like be cheerful once in a while, tell a cheerful story, and this is the kind of cheerful story he writes just to spite you. That's the feeling it gives me. But yeah, I will echo everything that Rob said, which is that the description of the world is like Clark Ashton Smith is just like master with prose, and that's never been a problem that he has. And as usual, the story is full of very beautifully crafted sentences and phrases, but also just like the description of everything is really colorful too, and is I I particularly like the fact that the island of Naat is sitting right at the edge where like the literal edge of the world, if I read the story correctly.
Mm.
Again, that's not often you see that kind of setup where the world is quite literally a plane. Yeah. I think where else have I seen that? Maybe Narnia, Chronicles of Narnia. That's it.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
Overall, great story. I was not prepared for the ending. I gotta say that, which makes the story quite surprise read at the end. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. That's my take.
Mm. So,
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it as well. I mean, I love the language. Maybe some modern readers might think it's antiquated or too floral in its prose, but I like that style. I miss that style, and I would love for that to come back into vogue someday. Maybe in some circles it is. It's more rarefied, I think, for people to enjoy this sort of purple prose, as you might say. But and apparently this is, I haven't read too much Clark Ashton Smith. I keep committing to and wanting to correct that. Um, but apparently, according to some reviews, this is his one of his less floral. maybe maybe you can, Robert, you can elucidate on that when you get a chance to chime in.
mm.
But I think you're more of our resident Clark Ashton Smith aficionado. But it really, again, just struck me, and I hate to keep doing this, but I keep reading these stories that inspired role playing, the people that created Dungeons and Dragons specifically. I can't help but read these old stories as like chronicles of adventures that people sat down at a table to role play out. So I just pictured Yadar as this character that went on an adventure, brought some friends with him, and went on an adventure to go find his lost love, and from a role playing perspective. So I could see people sitting around the table playing this out, and a spoiler alert again, as XJ intimated, like it didn't end very well for him or his companions. So so they failed in their quest. All the characters died, and in role playing parlance, it was a TPK, right? Total party kill. Um, but all that aside, I love his prose. I thought it was a bit of a coincidence. You can see this in a world steeped in magic. Him getting blown, his ship getting blown towards the exact place where his lost love is. Was it some sort of magical intervention? Was it the powers of love in the ether of the cosmos that drew them back together? Was it, some necromancy, some power of the necromancy that drew him there to the island where
It's
she just happened to be?
it's the power plot.
There you go. It's the power, the
Mm.
magic of plot. The magic of the story has to happen. Um, but
Mm.
I mean, sometimes when writers do that, I wish they would throw in like even a paragraph of saying like, he had a hint or an intimation spoken of, and at the ports of a city that he was at, that a ship left for an isle of ill repute, and a person of his love's description was on that ship. Something. Give us like a little something less than coincidence. But that's kind of splitting hairs
Well, there was something
fiction
like that.
wise. Was
There
there?
was
Okay,
something.
see,
Yeah.
I you- I maybe I missed it. So if you can like point that out to me, then that clears that little quibble up for me. If you can find that,
Yeah.
Robert. But maybe I did miss that because I sometimes I feel like I get pulled into the language of it, and there was a little bit of a gap between us reading this and then doing this recording. So I reread it, maybe a few days ago. So maybe I've read it twice now. It's between when we all thought to read it or you suggested it. So maybe it's possible I could miss something in like the prose of things.
Yeah,
Um,
it says it's on the first page there. He heard a rumor that might concern
ah,
Dalili, for the people of Oroth were still gossiping about the departure of a rich galley bearing a
okay,
lovely Outland girl,
there you go.
etc., etc.
So then maybe I subconsciously absorbed that. Never mind.
Mm,
Okay, fair enough. Well, that quibble's taken away. So great. Okay, so
mm,
that was towards the beginning of the story. I think like once you get deep into it, yeah, it's your mind gets lost. At least mine did in the tale. But
mm,
the tale, I mean, just again, spoiler alert. Please go read it. But culminating in this, just going there, and it was everything in necromancy, an island full of necromancy run by necromancers that you would think, and it's amazing. I mean, and it's as again a someone who's into the role playing world, you can see the inspiration for necromancy and evil necromancers in role playing games of today that echo from the past to the present. We undead servants. That's a great trope that's used widely in the role playing world and in fiction in general. The necromancers kind of feuding with each other. That fathers versus the sons versus the father who's existed too long because of his necromancy. So and wanting to overthrow him, and just that the epic battle between all of them at towards the end of the story was just great. With just the scenes of like them hacking into someone who's being kept alive by necromancy, basically, and his head's flopping around, almost severed from his body. But that was amazing. So yeah, I really loved it. I had a great
mm,
time reading this.
mm. Yeah. I like the bobbing heads when the ship is noticing the
Hmm.
ship from Naat, and behind it are these bobbing heads along the water, which are the dead swimmers. I think that's a nice touch.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of
Mm,
great usage of
mm,
what necromancy can do
It's
and the horrors it can
definitely
do.
it's definitely creepy. It's
mm,
Yeah.
it's it's it I mean that little bit actually took me out of the story, if I have to be quite honest. It felt a little bit like one of those Saturday morning horror kids horror show kind of thing. There's like this title that I can't quite recall. Yeah, it's a little bit of a zombie story kind of feel to me. It's less
mm,
I think the word I'm looking for is a bit of a body horror and less atmospheric horror. But that's like the only quibble I would
mm,
have. Yeah.
mm. Well, there's plenty of atmosphere, but the I would dispute the idea that this reviewer has that it's less there's less ornate prose in than other Clark Ashton Smith stories. I think it's about the same, really. It's
Okay.
it's on a par with his other well-written stories. Um, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I've read a few of his other stories, and I can see what you're saying. It seems like it's all the same level of like this. The writing style is very and the floweriness, and not in a bad way. Like I said, I like that the
Mm,
style of writing. So, and maybe it's just from reading tales from that time period and his other contemporaries. Um, I mean, I think it's definitely more accessible than say some of Lovecraft stories that are overwritten. They're so purple they move. They're almost like pitch black in like their prose. Like
mm,
it's just they're so dark, so purple and so florid in its description and use of language to the point of sort of absurdity when it comes to Lovecraft. So I don't feel that way when I'm reading Clark Ashton Smith's.
I would say jumping off on that, actually, I would say maybe, so I did also feel this particular story to be easier to read than the other Clark Ashton Smith stories that we have covered so far. I think it has more to do. I think the sentences were just more direct. They come more straight to the point. They are flowery and very decorative, and none of that's changed. I think they just come straight to the point a little bit more. It's not quite the same as the, say, the Venus story, where I actually had to sit down and think what what is this sentence actually trying to say, kind of feeling. Yeah, the way it's written is a little bit more direct.
I think maybe it's because you're learning to read more.
I went from a toddler to yeah.
Your reading level is going up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Intensive.
Robert.
Thoughts, yeah.
Yeah. Robert, your thoughts. Obviously, you recommended this, so.
Yeah, it's it is very puzzling to me, though, as I hinted perhaps in my introduction, why I can stand reading this story so much, because it is so gloomy, and I'm happy-go-lucky, cheerful chap. So it's a bit of a mystery, but it does take you into the mystery of creative writing and how it has its own laws that aren't normal logic as the world of everyday understands it, and therefore you can build something very colourful out of very ostensibly gloomy ingredients, and I think that's fascinating. You can probably do the opposite as well. You can probably build something gloomy out of very happy seeming ingredients. I shouldn't be surprised. Can't think of any examples.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it's definitely better than happily ever after, though. We consider the alternative, right? Like,
I mean, strictly speaking, it is happily ever after.
Well, yeah.
Emphasis on the ever after.
Right.
An exquisite ending, certainly.
Yeah, it's if they would have gotten away scot-free, it would have been okay. But I think having more of a melancholy ending, well, hey, at least they're reunited. The Yadar and his princess or his love, or they're reunited, but just not in the way that maybe they intended. Right? So,
and they've got the whole island now. They've got the whole island to themselves.
Right. Well, except for the other undead slaves, right, that are just continuing to eternally fish for.
Well, I mean, they keep to themselves, right? So it's it's definitely one of those things where it's like the monkey paw curls kind of thing.
Yeah.
I could totally see this ending in the monkey's paw.
Yeah, but honestly, like, this has definitely inspired me. Like, what would happen if in the aftermath? And again, from like, I've been trying my hand at writing more. I've been creating adventures for role playing for years, but what would happen? I mean, this seems like a place that if you and your adventuring party washed up after the events of this story, there would be a great adventure here where it's like you encounter all these undead people that are just going through these routines that they were programmed with through necromancy, for lack of a better term, and going about their duties. And then it's like, exploring where all these necromancers died, and finding the treasures, but encountering the dangers that are left behind, and discovering what happened on this island, in the aftermath. So again, I just can't separate my role-playing mind from like these stories that I read, because they are so inspirational to the genre and to the pastime. So I might have to write something up like an adventure for like my groups going forward, where it's like, you go to this island that's full of undead, like, and and that's not like unheard of in the role-playing sphere, but I think it'd be much more interesting, like the plot. This gives like a background as a reason why, because a lot of times in bad adventure design for role-playing, you just there's a bunch of stuff in like a dungeon or at a place, and there's no explanation. Here, there's a backstory and a reason.
I mean, like entire afternoon of trying to uncover what happened in the place is actually. I mean, if the story is written well and like the clues, the puzzles, and everything are placed together in a really well-paced manner, I would say, not clever but well-paced. Like the thing that's being reviewed is slow, and then the the way it's being reviewed is not in a direct linear line. It is a very good can be a very good, very powerful adventure depending on what the story is like. I would say like have you I know Rob probably definitely hasn't played it, but any of the Fallout games, you
Yeah,
ever tried any of the Fallout games? Yeah. So
a few of them.
so there are like some places where you go in and then you have to read through terminal text or writings on the wall to kind of piece together um, what the story actually is, and you don't always find them in. I think the key is you don't find the pieces of the story in like a straight line, right? And then you allow the player to piece things together. That is a very very powerful way of telling the story, just like bits and
Yeah,
pieces, and then have the player puzzle things out.
yeah, for sure. Maybe you know, Yasharn or Yacharn, or I'm trying to remember all the names of that. Sometimes all these names
Retron.
blend together. Yacharn, right? Something like that. Um, but like you can find like maybe scraps of his journal or something, pages from his journal, and you have them find the something like in that like that in his room or behind his throne or something, or in a box somewhere, so you can find little clues that way. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's definitely has fueled my imagination,
In a
sure.
way, the interesting one is even more than Vachon is his son Aldullah, who turns out to be the last one left alive, actually alive on the
Yeah.
island, because it says that he became possessed by a weird melancholy that turned quickly towards madness. No longer could he conceive the aim and objects of life, and the languor of death rose up around him like a black, stealthy sea, full of soft murmurs and shadow like arms that were fain to draw him downward. Soon he came to envy the dead, and to deem their lot desirable above any other. So he was thoroughly cheesed off with life and didn't enjoy it at all. Whereas um, Yadar and Dalili would seem to be, in a way, quite happy with being um, in their sort of half life, which is it's an irony which I hadn't spotted myself until just now. So just goes to show that I'm a bit slow at times.
Or great stories, just like great films, they reveal themselves every time you revisit them. They reveal something new. That's how you know they're great, right? So
Hmm.
um yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like it almost makes you ponder the nature of love and relationships, like it's a lot of times they fail in life, relationships fail, but sometimes maybe you need to be sort of undead, and then you can truly live together happily when you don't have a lot of expectations. You're just two
Yep.
sort of undead beings in this twilight where your love's not like soaring and grandiose. It's just kind of there in like this undead sort of way. So how
Yeah.
he described their love together in Undeath was kind of fascinating, and I'd never considered that either. So it was like,
Hmm.
that was just like a nice little twist on like happily ever after, like you're saying, XJ. They lived happily, really forever after, right? Until a party of adventurers comes on the island and kills them for,
Fair
right,
enough.
right,
Yes, adventurers do that. They
yeah,
upset the natural order of things, so to speak.
right. The unnatural order,
But
yeah.
yeah, I think like I have never seen. It's like I don't think I have read a story that is so gloomily optimistic. I would say in quite a while.
Hmm. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, and I guess with the one remaining, the last living son of the necromancer, that I guess living among the undead, I think it would tend to drive you crazy, right? Having slain your father and seen everyone else around you die. and you're just surrounded by the dead all the time, I can imagine they're not good for conversation.
Hmm.
So I can see how
Yeah.
one might go a little mad, and the allure and the dead around him probably seem very peaceful, and they have no uncertainty, right? They just go about their tasks mindlessly and with utter
Hmm.
certainty of being undead. So I can see how being
Hmm.
the last living
I
person with
can't
no.
I can't remember what happened to the weasel demon. Uh,
Oh yeah, what happened to the weasel demon, the creature?
Ah. Um.
I thought it was interesting that the how do I put this, like quite possibly the most evil presence in the whole story is basically a weasel.
Hmm. It
Yeah,
doesn't say what happened.
yeah, the creature,
Must be still
yeah, the
around.
demonic weasel. He must be still around, but he kind of disappears after the big fight, right?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I don't recall reading what happened to the weasel. I think it was just kind of that was one of the things that I was like, what happened to the weasel at the end of the when I remember thinking like, what happened to the weasel at the end of the story. I was like, oh well and good, but where's that weasel? Is he still on the island? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ezra,
He
the
wouldn't
weasel
bother.
familiar.
He wouldn't bother the undead though. Yadar and so on. He's probably only interested in sucking the blood of living people.
That's true. It's just like, I mean, like the most malign entity on that whole island is probably the weasel. I mean, like the chief necromancer himself, the main guy. Can't remember his name.
Vachon.
Bit of a tongue
Yeah,
twister
but
for me. But you know, he is the bad guy only because the weasel enabled him. And so
well,
I'm
yeah.
just like fascinated why it's like, it's a bit of a missed opportunity for me. Like I mean, I think Clark Ashton Smith probably wanted to write more about the two lovebirds becoming undead and living sort of happily ever after kind of thing. I think that's the ending he wanted to really focus on, but I also just feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity to not have the weasel play a bigger part, even if it's just like atmospheric, because like the weasel is quite clearly the most evil thing on the whole island. Yeah.
Well, he's a familiar, so he was summoned by Vacharn.
Vashon.
'Cause
Okay.
Vacharn was like the head necromancer, right? The father.
Yeah.
When his sons were Vokal and Oldola, right? Were the sons. So
But you know, like the way Clark Ashton Smith told the story though is that the demon could turn on Vachan at any moment. Like the only reason why he's able to keep the weasel in check is just because of the regular tribute that he's giving.
But Vachan was alive, you see. Weasel isn't interested in dead people, so once everybody gets dead, the weasel has no further part to play.
Well, like, couldn't the weasel have done something to the last living son, for instance? I remember that the weasel had a very specific, is very picky about his food, so to speak.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, you've got a point there.
only liking like a particular type of blood. But you know, couldn't he have like tried to influence the poor dude?
Well, we just don't know these things, so
yeah, it's all speculation because yeah, I mean Oldola is the last son, right? Who yeah, yeah, I can see what you're saying. Like, why didn't Esrit, the demon weasel familiar, keep trying to kill him in revenge? But yeah, hey, it's It wasn't the point of the story, I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess Clark Ashton Smith wanted to write a love story. Yeah, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to write a romance story.
Undead romance.
Yeah, another of the Zothique stories is a kind of romance story, only with a much more definitely happy ending. It's a surprising one. It's called the Charnel God, which shows every sign of being very gloomy, but actually the man and his love escape in the end, which is really, knowing Clark Ashton Smith, is quite a surprising ending. Anyway, we might do that one some other time.
So
that might have been.
So sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
I would say the Charnel. Was it the Charnel Prince? The Charnel
God. The Charnel God.
Yeah. That might have been the story that this reviewer I read online when I was kind of researching the story. He might have said that was the one that was a little more purpley prose than even this story, but I don't know. Confirm that, but that sounds familiar. Or maybe he was just comparing the two because they seem similar, like you said, like with sort of romance tales. But anyway, go ahead, XJ. Sorry.
I actually forgot what I was about to say.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm like half foot in the grave myself these days. I was gonna say, I mean, I was just gonna make a quip, I suppose. Like Clark Ashton Smith definitely shares some of H.P. Lovecraft's gloominess, doesn't he?
Yeah, I would say. Absolutely.
I guess surprisingly, it's I guess I wasn't seeing Clark Ashton Smith in that light. I always just thought, like, actually, like this particular story, right? I was quite I quite enjoyed like the how imaginative some of the stuff is, like the Black Sea that draws ships off their lanes, and then like the island of necromancers right at the edge of the world, and then this whole island filled with just three dudes, you know, raising dead bodies and all that stuff. Yeah, like the whole set piece is quite imaginative for its time, I would say. It doesn't feel there's like something about it that just feels very, I suppose you could say, fresh, because it's not something we commonly see anymore. Yeah. So I guess I was always like quite drawn by this colorful tapestry that Clark Ashton Smith usually paints with his imagination, that I don't realize that he's gloomy.
Well, nowadays people kind of behave as though most of the English language is off limits. You know, even if they could write like Clark Ashton Smith, they wouldn't dare, because they think, oh no, you mustn't do this. You know, you mustn't have too many adjectives. You mustn't use big words. You know, you've got to be terse and all that stuff. I think Hemingway's.
Is that really the case? Do people really do that, or is it just? I feel it has more to do with the fact that communication has just become a lot more to the point.
Well, what is the point, though? If the point is to create something beautiful, then you have the tools to do it.
Well, in like the modern setting, I think like everyone tries to get to the point sooner, because like if you don't state down what your point is within the first couple of sentences, people just stop reading because they have so much other stuff to read, right? It's like if I write an email to my at work to a colleague or a supervisor, I need to get my stuff down in like the first couple of sentences. If not, then it just becomes too long and then they don't read it. And it's the same case for like recruiters, or you want to find a job, you gotta get all your stuff down in like that first paragraph. If that first paragraph doesn't capture anyone's attention, no one is going to read the rest of it. So I would say it's a shortening of attention span that led to the current evolution of language.
Sure. I
If,
mean,
go on. If people are really such morons as that, then there's no point in them reading anything except for memos and emails and the sort of stuff you were talking about. The point of literature is it transports you to another world, and to do that, it's you need proper build up and tension and all these things that take time. You know,
yeah, and I have my dark moments where I see sort of the prevalence of flash fiction, stories around 1,000 words, 500 words, things like that, where it's like, oh, is our shortening attention span due to our modern communication styles and demands and the pace of our civilization that it's going in? Is that why we're seeing this rise in prevalence of like flash fiction,
Mm.
where it's getting shorter and shorter? I mean, I think of, I've been looking at some writing contests where they're like, oh, we'll take up to 8,000 words. I'm like, who's going to read 8,000 word stories besides like the person evaluating the entries? Like, is anyone going to read an 8,000 word story anymore? Like,
Depends
I
how
feel
good
like,
it is.
well, it's true. It's true. So I don't know. Like, I am getting a little cynical maybe as I think about like, yeah, who's going to read any of these stories? But you know, I guess you were saying. I think you were mentioning Hemingway. Does Hemingway have an outsized influence over the last century of literature of fiction? Um, Especially,
Well,
but I mean, he was writing in straight literary fiction versus like genre fiction. Is there still a place for more flowery prose in genre fiction
mm,
versus straight literary with a capital L with all its pretense?
I think really the comparison ought to be with music. Um, there is a music in the right use of words, and that has to come first. The rhythm and the evocation is
I
can't.
mean, even in music, like these days, the music these days are like really uh I guess the way I put it is straight to the point. That it's not like you could tell there is a real difference between the music these days and the music even like 30, 40 years ago, uh from bands like the Beatles and stuff. It's like I think it just comes down to time. Like people just don't have the mood to listen to. That's actually not strictly true. I think I'm checking myself, because there is a space where like really long, like the music can really be like a long conversation between the listener and the composer, and that's actually in video games. But the thing is, in video games, you're also doing something at the same time. So I think like the attention span shortening thing is a real thing, unfortunately.
Mm. Still, Clark Ashton Smith is actually hasn't been forgotten, and there are lots of people besides me who, if you go on the internet, you'll see there's loads and loads of links to Clark Ashton Smith. There is a real hunger for things that are written well. Same with H.P. Lovecraft as well. As I say, the stories written in the last 10 years of his life when he was really good. Uh, well, we won't consider the absurdly overwritten stuff of his earlier phase. But yeah, there are a lot of people around who want to read that kind of thing, but it's not being written anymore. So
Hmm.
there's a demand, but it's not being met.
I mean, it's like, how do I say this? Is when you write a story, you could write it in like a really beautiful way, but how do you let people know that the story is that your story exists, right? Like you could write like a incredible masterpiece that is like on par with Clark Ashton Smith or anything like that. But how do you let people know? And so it's like, and then if you take a step back from like reader's point of view, like, okay, Robert, you want to go read a story that is written like that, and then you have this entire catalog, like titles after titles and after titles, and then you're like, I don't have time to go through all of these titles, even retired. Like I would die before, being able to
Yeah.
read
Well,
everything.
problem.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
then
problem. Is the distribution. It's a distribution problem.
yeah.
You're quite right.
It's there's just so much of it, and how do you know which book is worth you spending that 1 week to sit down and properly appreciate, right? How do you separate the good stuff from the bad stuff? Like I haven't touched any modern stuff in like for a long time, and the primary reason is just because I don't know which ones are actually good enough for me to sit down and read, and that leads to all sorts of stuff. It leads to people like writing shorter stories because they get more churn that way, because like it's not the same economy as back when Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft wrote their stories, because back then there weren't that many people writing stories. There wasn't that much space. If people wanted to read genre fiction, it's either them or no one else, right?
Yeah,
You
I
just
get what
set
you're
your
saying.
parameters. Yeah. You just set your parameters. If you read 50 pages and it hasn't grabbed you, don't read the book. There's so much to read, so little time. So
Yeah, exactly. So it funnels everyone to try to capture people's attention within like the first 50 pages, as Anthony had said. It's like if you're not going to cram the most delicious part of your story within like that first few pages, like it's not going to grab anyone's attention really. So like that build up, all of that build up and stuff like that is being challenged, I would say.
Yeah, but the build-up's got to be well written. It's not just
For sure. I mean, like, and the best writers will be able to do that, I'm sure. But like I said, like like there is a series that I read a long time ago. It's called the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Now talk about build up. That book has one of the craziest build up ever, but it took so long. It took so goddamn long, and it's like I swear to God, it's like if I would never pick that book up now. Like I read that book when I was like 20 years old, or like when I had a lot more time. Like these days though, I don't have the time. I would never have picked up
Are you talking about the first book in the series, Gardens of the Moon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a books nerd, and I've read Gardens of the Moon and I slogged through it, and again, it seems like I can't separate role playing. Like I was like, oh, this is amazing world building, and I went and I jumped the gun because I'm a psycho, and I bought like the next 5 books in the series. And then I read I tried the next book, and it was just so much, and it was so thick, and it was so deep in detail that I'm like, dude, just create a role-playing world. Reading your books is a slog. And I took the rest of the books and just took a loss and took them to like a used bookstore and traded them in. I just can't. It was just too much. And this is someone who likes to read bigger and longer books, but it's just like at some point, even I'm just like getting older now, like you're saying. I'm just like, I don't have the time to read a 1,000-page book, and you have 12 of them. Like, it's.
And you know like actually the Malazan Book of the Fallen is really well written. Like the prose is really beautiful. That's what drew me in the first place. Alongside with the world building and stuff, but it's like after I mean like the one thing I'll say about the series is it it's very hard to piece together what's happening. Like I have no idea what's happening. So after the third book, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of done. Like I can't.
Yeah, I couldn't get through the second. Yeah, so it makes you really admire these kind of short stories that they can just deliver so much in such, terse amount of space and amount of words.
Mm-hmm.
That it's has like the industry been warped to like these door stopper books, these epics where it's just like to this ridiculous degree. It really makes you appreciate what these writers who were just spitting out these short stories that were episodic tales, that just what they can deliver in that short amount of time and that short amount of words is something that we need to recapture. And I admire Robert's your positive attitude and your optimism that there's still a place for these sort of tales. It's finding those people. I get social media to the rescue for all its faults and foibles. XJ, to answer your question, you got to blast out and scream to the rooftops, over the rooftops of the world, through social media, about, hey, I wrote this thing.
Yeah, I mean, like these days it's basically everyone fighting for everyone else's attention. It's a tough competition, and yeah, like I said, like I would never pick up. I would look at the size of Garden of the Moon today and be like, I'm not touching that. No. And like the other book that The Name of the Wind, regardless of what anyone else says about and I agree with them on the second book, and I don't know if the third book will ever be published. That first book was actually really good. It was the prose was amazing. But today I probably won't pick it up because I will look at the size of the book and then I'll be like, no time.
Yeah, I mean, even a 500-page book these days, I'm like, I don't know. Do I even want to like read a 500-page book? Like, it needs to be like 350, 400 pages. Like, something even like this thick. This is like, even this thick is like, oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
But at least it's.
Yeah. I mean,
like
hang on.
600
Why?
pages.
How come there are all these fat books? I quite agree that there are loads and loads of fat books. There's a sort of obesity crisis in the book world. But why, if people's attention span is so short, what is going on?
So one thing is, I don't think the thick books are being written anymore. Like
Well, they're in the shop, so
the Malazan things like the Malazan Book of the Fallen. There aren't that many writers writing such thick books anymore. I think like the only one that still does that is Brandon Sanderson.
Yes.
And maybe maybe Stephen King. I don't know. The guy probably still have stories stashed around somewhere that he pulls out and then sends to the publisher. The guy's is practically an undead of his own in his own rights. But yeah, like I don't like if you have a thick book, you open the pages. Usually the fonts are really big.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, the words are bigger.
I don't think people write really long epics anymore. Yeah.
Well, again, it makes you appreciate what these short story writers of yesteryear, like Smith and his ilk, makes you appreciate what they can do and pack into a relatively amount of words.
Like there's a guy called Ted Williams. He wrote Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, And to me, that is probably one of the most influential modern fantasy book. He basically set the format for the genre that came after, like Wheel of Time and everything that came after, sort of followed that format. He has a follow up on his Awesome Art series. You know, after the trilogy, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn had ended, he had a sequel. I haven't touched it at all. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, man, it's and I love Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I really liked it, but I just haven't picked it up just because it's like, oh my god, look at the size of the length of the story. No, I can't.
Yeah.
So unfortunate, but
Well. Yeah, I know. There's so many. You know, it's the getting older and realizing how precious time is. You know, I have other things that I should prioritize reading wise, and you know, so. But yeah. Any other thoughts on circling back? I know we kind of went off on a musing of the writing in general, but any other thoughts on the story Necromancy and Naat before we move on to our final grades? Yeah.
I think we've covered it really.
Yeah, I think though, obviously we were very inspired by it. I think even in a meta sort of way, just on musing on the craft itself. So I think it's another strength of this story. Just yeah.
I mean, you could. I mean, it's you can't take that away from these guys for sure. It's like they laid the template, and whether people know it or not, they follow the template, and then don't. You know, it's proven to have worked. So.
Yes, it is undead.
Ever after.
It shambles on, lives among us to this day.
Yeah, I would give it a 8 upon 10. Yeah, unhesitatingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 8 out of 10. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I was going with 9. Robert, what do you think?
10 out of 10, obviously.
Well, no, I'd give it a 9.5
Oh.
out of 10. The only criticism I would make of it was that I thought the bit with the cannibal and the demon Efrit went on a bit too long, sort of 2 or 3 pages. But that's a minor criticism, very minor criticism.
Yeah, I think my criticism just stems from some of the, you know, and I've been reading this kind of fiction forever, but I think he made his names a little too similar of all the characters. I don't know, maybe it's just me, and I like a lot of fantasy fiction where there's crazy made up names.
If I have a criticism of Clark Ashton Smith overall, it's the names. Like I cannot remember any of them.
Yadar, Bashar.
I cannot remember any of them. Like all the stories that I've read, I cannot remember any of the names just because it's like so out there. Like it's like he put it out from like today I'm just gonna throw a couple of syllables together and see how that sounds, kind of feel. So
a minor quibble, you know.
yeah.
Well, what would you have? I mean, would you prefer they were called, you know, George and Fred? And...
No, but
I like the fantasy names. It's just like when he has two, like Yadar and Vasharn. Come on, like I don't know. Like if for me, I would have made them use it. I don't know. I would have tried to make them a little more different, but I don't know. Again, it's minor quibble.
I mean, that's it's been a while since we last touched Conan, but like within the reading like of any of the Conan stories, I can usually remember the names.
That's true.
So
because the writer didn't invent the names, he borrowed names from history and existing culture.
Maybe, but also there's a way syllabus tends to fit together that makes them easier to remember for me anyway.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think Conan's characters, even like the hyphenated ones, like of those. A lot of his wizards have his sorcerers have like the hyphenated like Thothamon or whatever. Even those are unique. Like you remember, there's a difference between his hyphenated sorcerer names. I don't know. Like it's just structures that I think he makes them different just enough where you can like okay right. Whereas all of the names in this story were like 2 syllables, except for Derwelly or whatever her name was. I don't know what the female name.
Aldula.
Oh yeah, Uldula is like the other one. That's the other son, right? It's like Vokal is one son. Uldula, those were okay, but it just seems like they're all like Uldula is 3 syllables. Okay, you got me there. But the other ones are like Vokal, Yadar.
I mean, mainly it just feels like the syllables are randomly chosen and then forced together. So it's a bit harder. It's a bit harder to roll off the tongue, one for one thing, and then it's just like it's such an uncommon pairing that it becomes like less easy to remember. But that's my only criticism of Clark Ashton Smith in general, really. Yeah, just the name seems random.
Robert's got a good point. Yeah, Robert's got a good point. The Conan names are more historic because it's the ancient past of Earth, right? So, yeah, I guess maybe that's the familiarity. Anyway, but we've given it some really high grades, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad story, just like minor quibbles in there. Yeah, alright.
Inspiration.
So I guess we have came to the gloomy, happy conclusion of this podcast. Okay, so any last words? All right. Well, if that's the case, then thank you everyone for listening to us ramble on and shake our fists at the sky for the last bit there. And if you like the podcast, please like and subscribe and all that. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.